to the throne, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It solidifies his power as he enters the world stage to a greater degree. And it's just the start. This palace purge has investors reacting, and we're seeing it in the oil markets. But other foreign investors are eyeing the change with optimism. Sam Zell, the chairman of Equity Group Investments, a real estate firm, says he is more likely to pour money into new projects there. He said of the arrests that they were long overdue for a country resistant to modernization and plagued by graft. I want to bring in Gerald Celente, founder of the Trends Research Institute, to dig deeper on what we're seeing coming out of Saudi Arabia. Let's start with your political take on this purge. Those are establishment and status quo pillars of the country. On top of that, we know the Saudi military intercepted a ballistic missile near Riyadh fired by Houthi fighters in Yemen. The Crown Prince calls it an act of aggression by Iran. And then you've got that questionable helicopter crash killing one prince and 3 government officials. What's your reaction to all of this breaking out in just the last few days?
Well, tracking trends is an understanding of where we are, how we got here, and where we're going. And the how we got here, you could see this coming for a long time, and we've been speaking about it for a long time. This is a buildup, as we see it, with a war with Iran. And the Crown Prince, you know how people become princes. A princess kisses a frog and the guy becomes a prince. I mean, enough with these labels, really. I mean, this is a gang that's running the show. And what happened is his father is very ill from a lot of reports. And this guy at 30 years old, let us not forget, launched a war against Yemen, the poorest nation in the Middle East, killed over 10,000 people, a great humanitarian crisis, a cholera epidemic, and this isn't in the news at all. This guy launched it. What he's doing is solidifying power to get rid of everybody else as his father's getting closer to the deathbed from a lot of reports that are coming in. So it's very disturbing in the sense that anybody would support this considering their track record, but I guess for Zell it's a good investment opportunity.
Yeah, but let's look at the modernization. He's given women more rights. He's opening up the country. He's obviously from a younger generation, and he's cleaning house. I mean, is there anything redeemable in these actions?
Well, yeah, I mean, what are they letting women allowed? They're allowing them to drive.
Well, but that's something they fought for a long time. At least it's something. Don't you think it's a symptom of future modernization?
I think it's a symptom of some modernization, but not that much. Again, let's look at the track record, and let's look what he said last May, the Crown Prince, is that we won't wait for the battle with Iran to be in Saudi Arabia. Instead, they are going to take the battle to Iran. I mean, this is what he's talking about last May. And so what we're looking at is a build-up to war. They're accusing Lebanon and Iran of declaring war against Saudi Arabia. Nobody declared war. So what we're seeing is this is much bigger. We also saw the prince. Also, there's reports that he's been in Israel. And Israel's been very anti-Iran, as we all know. You remember Netanyahu with the UN.
Well, there's an existential argument happening there as well. These are strong words from both sides, but Iran has said, we want to annihilate Israel.
They said that Israel has the right to exist because, again, for a lot of people that say it doesn't, in the sense that who created this and when was it created and what's happened to the Palestinians in this whole deal.
But that's also a separate argument. But okay, let's keep going.
These words, not actions.
Right. Okay. Obviously very, very drastic. A lot of people have a lot of questions. It's a lot to unfold in just days. And we have seen the change in oil. We have not seen a spike like this since June 2015. Brent crude has closed yesterday at above $64 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate settled at over $57. What does this mean going forward, in your opinion? If you could read the tea leaves and look forward to this, investors are eyeing this with a lot of questions.
Let's look at Saudi Arabia. Go back when oil started going down in 2014. Their plan was to keep pumping more, and they would put the frackers out of business. That didn't work, so now what they've done, they made an agreement with other OPEC members in Russia to cut back on production. Now what this has done is really jacked up the prices because of the fear that's going on there. Also, the unrest in Iraq with Kurdistan. So now, or the Kurdistani region. So now what we're looking at is that oil prices could spike if this goes out of control. Saudi Arabia needs oil at $100 a barrel for their economy to break even. So they're way down. They're issuing bonds as well, as we know.
Right.
So now, if we see this happening, this could end up also doing great damage to the equity markets. And in the United States, people, 78% of the people, according to studies, are living paycheck to paycheck. What's going to happen with the Christmas holiday and oil prices going up?
All right, let's talk about gas prices. What we see retail. AAA says gas prices jumped 6 cents last week, 31 cents over last year. Last week in California, 12-cent gas tax increase in California. Average prices, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio cover a spectrum from $2.60 to $2.72. Going into the holidays, what do you have to say about this?
Again, if this breaks out into war, and they're talking war talk, they're saying the countries are declaring war. And you're hearing President Trump also supporting both the prince and the king. So if this happens, we're going to see oil prices spike probably above $100 a barrel if this thing starts unfolding. And it will bring down the equity markets. And also, we're seeing retail already in the States. They're announcing Black Friday sales. This will put a big damper on Christmas sales.
Thank you so much for your input, Gerald Celente, founder of the Trends Research Institute.
Thank you.
Mike Gleason, well, I want to start out talking about the first half of the year of Donald Trump's presidency. Trump had an ambitious agenda to get the economy going but hasn't been able to push any significant legislation through this Congress. How do you see that playing out from here, and what bearing does all this have on the dollar, Gerald, because the greenback has been taking it on the chin here recently? Gerald Celente, well, you point out something very significant. Go back to when Trump got elected, and going into the beginning of the year, so from November to the beginning of 2017, the dollar was soaring, and it all of a sudden started reversing. I've been around a long time, and I've never seen anything like this in my life, with so much hatred is being sent out by the media, not only against Trump, but the Russians, and any other person or country that they don't like. Of course, I'm no Trump supporter, I'm a political atheist. I didn't vote for either of Trump or Clinton in the last election. And I'm not one of these people that say, oh, you have to go out and vote. If you don't vote, then you deserve what you get. No, if you vote, you deserve what you get, because I don't support the Bloods and the Crips, and that's what the Democrats and Republicans are to me. They're murderers and thieves, their track records prove it. So, what I'm saying about Trump has nothing to do with me being a Trump supporter. The hatred that the media has been selling, with hating the Russians, no evidence at all that they hacked into the Democratic National Committee, it's our assumption, it's our belief, it's our analysis. Can you imagine going to a court, Mike, and saying that to a judge? The judge might say, show me some evidence. How dare you ask me to show you evidence, Judge? Don't you know who I am? I'm a prostitute for the Cartoon News Network, I'm a prostitute for the New York Times, the toilet paper of record. I'm a prostitute for MSNBC. I'll shove any crap I want down your throat and you repeat it to the American people. I don't need proof, all need are assumptions, and you know how good those are. You might remember that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. So, what I'm saying is they sell lies, and they sell hatred and dissent in the United States like I've never seen before in my life. Every time somebody got elected that you didn't like, the media would say, well, you may not have supported that person, but now it's the President of our United States and we have to all work together. So now going back to the dollar. The war against Trump is actually the war against the economy in many ways, because when the Trump rally began, and anybody could go back to the facts, when Trump looked like he was going to win on November 8, in the morning of November 9, the Dow futures dove by over 800 points, thinking that he was going to win because the markets wanted Hillary. And then it reversed. And it reversed on the belief that his programs, again whether you like them or not the issue, only talking about business, were good for business because of tax reform, because of deregulation again, whether or not you agree with it isn't the issue, we're talking about business and with also the rebuilding of the infrastructure. None of that happened. That boosted of the dollar, now we're going into reverse. And, also, the rhetoric keeps heating up. Not only against Russia, but across the globe. Mike Gleason, it has been almost a decade now since the 2008 financial crisis. We've seen evidence since that time that some Wall Street banks have acted like criminal enterprises, and they continue to enjoy the support of politicians in Washington, D.C. No one has been more vocal on that subject than you. Now we have Donald Trump promising to drain the swamp, but more evidence of cheating and market rigging have been piling up. You could be forgiven for thinking that a reckoning will soon come, but experience has shown, these characters are basically untouchable. What are your thoughts, Gerald? Any of these folks going to go to jail anytime soon? Gerald Celente, well, they're too big to jail. You remember that little freak, Eric Holder? Yeah, you remember him, he was brought in by Obama, the most transparent president he says in his campaigning for the presidency back in 2008. Yeah, so transparent that you could see right through him. He was a guy that promised to bring the banksters to jail. And Eric Holder, where does he go? He goes back to work for one of the white shoe boys firms over there on Wall Street, and wants to protect the banksters, and he says they were basically too big to jail. We saw, what, $150 billion worth of fines, and not one head roll? It's a neo-feudal society, there are different rules for the political nobility and the economic elite. As you point out, yeah, Trump didn't drain the swamp, he just brought in new swamp creatures. Whether it's Nukin or all the generals that he brought in. I've never seen a White House filled with so much military brass and a bunch of Wall Street billionaires. So, when we're looking at it, no, I don't see any of that change coming. But again, going back to the dollar and the strength of it, there may be some positives coming out of it. Wilbur Ross, who's the Commerce Secretary, this isn't a guy I'd want to do business with, but if this is the guy that's going to defend my interest on the business field, and he's going to renegotiate these lousy trade deals, that's great for America. So, there's a give and a take on it, but right now it's only been a one-way street, and that is when you look at the polls, that Trump is down at historic lows, and look at Congress, what, only 10% of the people look up to Congress? And yet people argue that their bunch of crooks is better than your bunch of crooks? So, I don't understand what's going on, how people could take orders from these jerks that play politicians. Mike Gleason, speaking of the 2008 financial crisis, it looks to us like history is likely to repeat, perhaps sooner rather than later. You can make a good argument that a number of markets are now in bubble territory, including stocks and bonds. There is also plenty of irresponsible lending, subprime autos, student loans, and hundreds of billions lent to oil companies which may go broke unless oil gets back up towards $80 per barrel. Markets are certainly due for a big correction. That said, if the VIX is any indication, traders have never been less worried. What do you think? Can the wheel stay on this a while longer? Gerald Celente, yeah, they can. And that's the one thing that I learned, and you really nailed it before when you were talking about the corruption. They'll rig the system any way they want to make things happen. Look, I would have thought this thing would have collapsed in 2012. I never heard of negative interest rates. You know, Mike, I like you, you're a nice guy, I got a 10-year bond for you. Yeah, you buy, and then I'm going to give you negative yields after 10 years because I like you so much. I mean, who could get away with this kind of crap? The central banks, the Bank of Japan. And it's the same thing around the world. So, people are dying to get anything that's going to show them any kind of return. So that's what's keeping the markets. They'll rig the game anywhere they can. I got a better one for you. Hey, how about a thing called quantitative easing? Isn't that nice? Negative rate interest policy, zero interest rate policy, we'll do anything we can to keep the Ponzi scheme going and the banksters rich. One of our Trends Journal contributors, Anthony Frieda, a great illustrator, did a cover for us, and he had a Jesus Christ with a whip and he's driving the banksters out of the temple, but now they have names in front of them, JP Morgan, Chase, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, on and on. Nothing's really changed. And that's all it is. I mean, look at the guy, the little boy they elected over there in France, a Rothschild kid, Macron. And it's one after another. So, I mean, they'll rig the game any way they can. Will there be a correction? We're forecasting a 10% correction. And so are others. But again, we don't see a crash, because they're going to do what they can to prop this thing up. I talked about Japan. What do they have? The GDP is, what, 250, that's a GDP ratio. I mean, look at China, 300. So, they just keep the Ponzi schemes going. They'll invent anything that they can. Mike Gleason, we definitely want to get your thoughts on North Korea since the mounting tensions there have made big news this week. The prospect of a nuclear exchange is of course what people worry about. We're well accustomed to bluster and threats from Kim Jong-un and his predecessors, but now Donald Trump has threatened to use America's nuclear arsenal. What is your best guess on how this will play out? Will Trump launch a preemptive attack using conventional weapons? Is this brinkmanship, just a negotiating tactic? What? Gerald Celente, it's not a negotiating tactic. I mean, I've been hearing this North Korea stuff all my life. Read the details of the sanctions that they just put on North Korea. What is it? The UN voted, because they're testing missiles. You know what North Korea's GDP is? It's smaller than West Virginia's. They have a population the size of Texas. You read the quotes coming out on what they're doing and why they're doing it, and it says, North Korea warns US, rejects talks. The sanctions resolution aims to cut a third, or $1 billion from North Korea annual foreign reserves. And I'm not good at math, but a third, or $1 billion, that's $3 billion is their total foreign revenue. $3 lousy billion. What is Bill Gates worth? $86 billion. Warren Buffett, $76 billion. Bezos, $73 billion. Zuckerberg, $56 billion. Look at the tough talk against the little nobodies. The reason why North Korea has nuclear weapons, and they made this very clear, is because they saw what the United States did to Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. And they say, you're not going to do that to us. What countries has North Korea invaded? Look what they did to Libya, overthrowing Gaddafi. Hey, how about that war they launched against Afghanistan, because they had to find a man by the name of Osama bin Laden that was living over there. Oh, and look at that war in Iraq. Yeah, they had to get rid of Saddam Hussein. Those North Koreans, they can't stay home. And now they're in Somalia and Sudan, and they just sold $150 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia to slaughter the innocent Yemenis, the poorest nation in the Middle East. Of course I'm talking about the United States. North Korea and China have been asking the United States and South Korea, stop doing these massive military drills on our shores. Stop threatening us constantly. What if we had North Korea up in Canada, China, and Russia doing military drills down in the Gulf of Mexico, and Iran off the coast of New York? They'd be bombing the hell out of them from the United States, these people for getting too close to us. Yet the United States' aggression against this country. Do they have a crazy guy running the show? Sure looks it, but hey, welcome to America. Look at the freak show that we got going on and have been going on for a long time. So we have no right being there. Honor the founding fathers, no foreign entanglements. This is all rhetoric, we're fighting a nobody that's done nothing to us. They have not done anything to the United States. Oh, they may have a missile that could hit Topeka, Kansas by 2025. I got a gun, does that mean I'm going to shoot somebody? If there's 50 cops outside, and somebody shoots in one of them, are the other 49 going to blow your brains out? What threat is North Korea to the United States? Mike Gleason, with all this said, Gerald, what are your thoughts on gold? It has encountered some road bumps, but it is held in there pretty strong, actually, and never fell below $1,200. What trend is in store for the yellow metal in your view? Gerald Celente, well, it's exactly what you said before. When you're talking about what's going on with a cheap dollar, that's keeping gold up and also the instability. Gold is still the ultimate safe haven asset. And other countries around the world are buying it because they understand that. We get the diluted message in the United States. You could talk all you want about, for example, or did you see earnings coming in, how great they are. Yet, when you use the GAAP earnings principles, the generally accepted accounting principles, but when you look at the investment research company and they talk about the other measurements, the return on invested capital measurements, instead of seeing over 10% growth over the last 2 years, you're looking at like a -5% decline. So these numbers are rigged too, when you look at them. The whole thing is being held up on hype and hope. Then you look at where the gains are coming from, only a few industries. One of them being oil, because oil prices went up a little bit, so the energy sector is going up. But long term, energy isn't going to keep going up, it's a supply and demand issue. And every time the oil prices go up a little bit over $50 a barrel, you got more supply coming online, and it keeps the prices in check. So, when you look at the technology, you look at energy, you look at the banking sector, it's only a few sectors that are driving up the financials. And the cheap dollar is keeping the emerging market game alive as well, because they're borrowing money for free. Then they borrow that money. If the dollar goes up, then you're going to start seeing some real panic, and if interest rates really start going up, the game is over. Again, this is a Ponzi scheme that's been generated by quantitative easing, which means printing tons of cheap money and negative, or zero interest rate policy that allows stock buybacks and merger and acquisition activity. End of story. When interest rates go up, this thing goes down, and it goes down big. But the interest rates have to go up to a percentage much beyond where they are now, they've got to get back into the 3.25% range, as we see it, before you're really going to start feeling the pressure. But even it at 1.5 to 2, you're going to start seeing it really starting to hit. Mike Gleason, well, as we begin to close here, Gerald, any final thoughts or anything that you want to hit on that we haven't discussed already? Gerald Celente, I think we've hit on it all. The other wild card to watch also, by the way, is the rhetoric against Iran. That keeps going on and on. Iran has not invaded a country for 250 years. Yet, but they're in Syria. Well, that's because Assad invited them in, and whether you like him or not, he was elected, and an international forum said it was a fair and free election. But the hatred that the United States has against Iran. And again, people know nothing about the history of how the United States, the CIA, and the MI6 in the UK overthrew the democratically elected government of Mossadegh in Iran in 1953, because the guy had the nerve to nationalize the oil company, and that's when they brought in the Shah. And the oil companies that were going to be hit by that were Anglo-Iranian Oil, better known as British Petroleum, BP, and Standard Oil, better known today as ExxonMobil. So we believe the one to really watch, the wild card there, that could really be a destabilizing force, driving up oil prices, driving up gold prices, and really causing major destabilization not throughout just the Middle East, but through much of the world, is if there's a real war with Iran. And also, keep your eye on Ukraine. That's very unstable, and that could explode yet again at any moment. Mike Gleason, Well, Mr. Celente, thanks as always for your time and your analysis today. We love having you on, because you really don't pull any punches, and I know our audience really appreciates that. Now, before we let you go, as we always ask you to do, please let folks know about how they can get their hands on the wonderful information that you put out both online and with the Trends Journal magazine, as well as anything else that's going on there at the Trends Research Institute that folks should know about. Gerald Celente, well, they can go to trendsresearch.com or trendsjournal.com. We not only publish the Trends Journal, which is a quarterly, 50-page magazine, no ads, full color, and, also, we have a Trends in the News broadcast each weekday night, and we have a Trends Monthly, Trend Alerts, and there's a money-back guarantee. It's the only place we are going to read and hear history before it happens. Mike Gleason, well, excellent stuff once again. I hope we can catch up with you later this year as these events begin to unfold, and ultimately, what it will likely mean for precious metals investors. Thanks again, Mr. Celente, for being so generous with your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer and have a great weekend. Gerald Celente, thank you, and thank you for all you do, Mike. Mike Gleason, well, that will do it for this week. Our sincere thanks to Gerald Celente, publisher of the renowned Trends Journal. For more information, the website again is trendsresearch.com. Be sure to check that out.